Welcome back. This is Australian Agenda. Well, our next guest comes to us out of Tasmania, the Independent Andrew Wilkie. Mr Wilkie, thanks for your company.
Good morning, Peter.
Our plan had been to start talking to you about policy, including the Gonski report and indeed, obviously, poker machine reform, but we will get to that. But we've got to start where I'm sure you're expecting us to go. The YouTube video of Kevin Rudd doing an interview at 5 minutes to midnight with David Spears to try to put his side of the story. The speculation about whether it was a Gillard supporter who, in fact, leaked that information. And, of course, Darren Cheeseman coming out and suggesting that Julia Gillard is finished and Kevin Rudd should come back. As one of the key independents, straight up question: is there any chance that you would support a Labor government led by Kevin Rudd were he to come back?
Well, Peter, I'm now an independent with no agreement with anyone and with any party. In the first instance, I would seek to work with whoever is the next Prime Minister, whether it be Julia Gillard continuing, or Kevin Rudd, or Tony Abbott, or even Malcolm Turnbull.
But straight off the bat, though, in other words, if Labor did change leaders, given what's already happened between you and the current Prime Minister over poker machine reforms, that's no deal breaker for you in the sense that you're open-minded to the possibility of either staying as you are, or possibly even coming back into the fold and supporting the government?
Yes, I am open-minded. The agreement that fell over was with Julia Gillard personally, and I had to withdraw from that agreement, or withdraw my support, because she failed to honour that deal. She and I sat down, we negotiated poker machine reform, we put our names to it, we signed it. She failed to deliver on it. And Peter, at the end of the day, I think that became, for many people, much more about a politician's ability to honour a deal and to be a person of their word than it was about poker machine reform. So, that's with Julia Gillard. I would not negotiate a new deal with Julia Gillard. That's over. I am open-minded about Kevin Rudd. And look, I'm favourably disposed towards Kevin. I think he's a pretty decent character. Mind you, it might be someone else who's the next Prime Minister, and I would need to work with whoever it is.
Mr Wilkie, have you had any discussions with Kevin Rudd or anyone that would be characterised as a supporter of Kevin Rudd on the Labor side over the recent weeks or months about the possibility of a change of leadership?
In last November, I had a long meeting with Kevin Rudd in his office in Canberra, at which we talked about a range of things, including the possibility of him coming back to the Prime Ministership.
Did he seek your support?
It was left unsaid. But look, I want to make the point again here that I am an independent, and I need to be able to work with whoever is the Prime Minister. Clearly, my relationship with the current Prime Minister has taken a great battering, and in fact a word has not passed between Julia Gillard and myself since Friday night, the 20th of January. If there is a change of leadership to whoever that is, or change of Prime Ministership to whoever that is, whether it be Kevin Rudd or another member of the Labor Party, or if there's an election that goes to Tony Abbott or even Malcolm Turnbull, I need to be able to work with whoever is the Prime Minister, because that's in my electorate's best interest, and that gives me the best opportunity to progress the policy reforms I want to see.
Mr Wilkie, if you need to work with whoever the Prime Minister is, if you haven't had a conversation with Julia Gillard basically since she reneged on her deal with you on poker machines, it sounds like you're saying that you'd find it easier to work with Kevin Rudd than you would with Julia Gillard.
Yes, I would find it easier to work with Kevin Rudd than Julia Gillard at this point in time.
Could I take you back to that meeting that you just described in November, Mr Wilkie? Could you please give us some information and detail about what was discussed at that meeting, insofar as did Kevin Rudd offer you anything? Did he promise to perhaps renegotiate the pokies deal? Did he offer anything that might be interpreted as trying to persuade you to support him in a possible Rudd government?
Look, in essence, that was a confidential discussion. What I will say, it was about 90 minutes. We explored a broad range of issues that are important to him and to me. I think we were sounding each other out about, where we stand and what our expectations are. I didn't seek anything. He didn't offer anything specifically. And look, if it comes to a change of leadership, I think it might be in the public interest for someone like myself to very quickly make a decision of whether or not I'll support that person formally or not. It won't be in the public interest for another 17-day hiatus as we had after the federal election. Don't take this to mean I would negotiate a deal with Kevin Rudd. I don't know what I'd do. We don't even know if Kevin Rudd's going to challenge for sure. We don't even know that if there's a challenge, Kevin Rudd will be successful, whether it might be someone else. Frankly, at this exact point in time, I'm quite comfortable not having any formal agreement with anyone, and I think it's actually been very well received within my electorate, and that may well be my default position, to not have to sign a written agreement. It was always very difficult for all of us independents to have to reach agreements as we did after the election 18 months ago.
But you would prefer not to go to an early election, and even if you continued to sit without an agreement with whomever is Prime Minister, you'd prefer that this particular term to run its course?
Yes, that is a certainty, that no matter who is the Prime Minister, whether it be Julia Gillard continuing or she's be replaced by someone in the Labor Party, I do believe strongly it's in the public interest for Parliament to be stable and to go full term. So long as Julia Gillard continuing or a replacement provides stable, competent government, then I think that would be a good thing. I don't think it's the right thing to do to be racing back to an election before the 3 years is up. I think it's a waste of money. I don't think it shows respect for the people who cast their votes 18 months ago. If there is a leadership change in the Labor Party, I would hope that whoever the new Prime Minister is would go the full 18 months. He or she would have my encouragement to do so.
Bearing in mind that conversation that you had with Kevin Rudd was confidential, did he in any way give you an indication of whether he was more likely to go to an early election, or did he leave you with the impression that should he challenge and should he take over the leadership, he would go full term?
Look, I don't think Mr Rudd would mind me saying that he indicated a preference for a parliament to go full term. I think that's a fair comment he made. He understands that would be in the public interest. I take him at his word on that.
The independents, you're all quite close, personally sitting on the crossbenches, even where you obviously have policy disagreements along the way, representing very different electorates with different philosophical outlooks. That said, because of that closeness, do you know of Kevin Rudd meeting with other independents? Do you know what their predisposition would be towards exactly the questions we've asked you, I suppose, in terms of whether or not you'd be prepared to continue to support the government if it was to change leaders?
Oh, I think it's been reported in the media already that Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott have both come out and said they have been approached either by Kevin personally or one of his supporters. Mind you, Rob and Tony have both indicated a strong preference for there being no change of leadership. They clearly have more at stake here with Julia Gillard staying as the Prime Minister, because they continue to have a formal agreement with her. They've both been very publicly supportive of Julia Gillard. You'd have to ask them, of course, but my assessment is that both those men would much prefer Julia Gillard to stay as Prime Minister. My position is different to that. I've been let down greatly by Julia Gillard, and I'm quite open-minded about a change of leader. And if it is Kevin Rudd, I already have a good working relationship with Kevin. I'm sure I could develop an even better working relationship with him as Prime Minister. That is not to say I would necessarily sign a written agreement with him. It may well stay as it is at the moment, with no agreement. But I just work and support legislation on its merits, as I've done in this last week. I supported the means test on the private health insurance rebate. I supported the partial abolition or the virtual abolition of the Australian Building and Construction Commission, because I approached both of those pieces of legislation on their merit, and I thought the government's position had merit. I also supported the opposition a number of times this week.
We asked, I wanted to ask you about your attitude towards Julia Gillard in the context of some comments that Simon Crean made in the Parliament throughout the week. He was trying to score some political points on the opposition, but to me it sounded like he was saying something that his Prime Minister should have been listened to vis-a-vis her breaking of the deal with you. Let's just have a listen.
I say when you enter an agreement, you've got to honour it. And the agreement that was entered, Mr Speaker...
Mr Wilkie, this was an agreement that he was talking about that was quite different to what I'm now asking you about, but is this how you see it as a real issue for her, not just to you personally, but in the wider electorate for Julia Gillard in terms of trust? We had the carbon tax, you can have different views on that, but now we've got her breaking of a deal with you. It's going to be hard for the government to go on under her leadership with that sort of broken trust persona, surely. Look,
I think you're right. The reneging on the deal with me, I think, has done Julia Gillard a lot of damage, self-inflicted damage, I would point out. Look, clearly there are many Australians who want to see meaningful poker machine reform. But there's many, many more Australians who saw the deal with me and honouring that deal with me as a test of the government's character. And look, if it had happened in isolation, maybe all would be well for the Prime Minister. But given all of the other events and accusations swirling around her, I think it was very, very damaging, very damaging. And certainly the feedback that I'm receiving, particularly within my electorate, is that it was a test of character, and people wanted to see people to honour, to be of their word, honour their promises. And that's why, at the end of the day, I had to withdraw my support, as I had said I would do repeatedly. I think I hope I've been seen to be a man of my word. The community is very, very cynical about politicians and party politics, and that was an opportunity for the Prime Minister to show she was a person of her word. She would pursue tough reform, and she decided to roll over. I think she expected me to roll over, but I couldn't do that when I had said so many times that.
Mr Wilkie, could I ask you this then? You've been watching what's been going on, like we all have, and you're closer to the action than a lot of people as well. You can see the change of dynamic. Do you believe that there will be a challenge, and do you believe that Kevin Rudd will be successful?
There will be a challenge. I must confess, for a while I thought it was just media mischief, right up until I had a 90-minute meeting with Kevin Rudd. Kevin clearly wants the job back. That's understandable. He was deposed in remarkable circumstances, and it is entirely fair enough that he would want his job back. It's entirely understandable that he would be resentful of the events of going on 2 years ago. There will be a challenge. And I suspect he may well be successful. And if he is successful, then I'll aim to work with him to get the sort of policy outcomes I want to see. For example, the government continuing to prosecute its own poker machine reforms, plus getting some dividends from my own electorate.
And can I just ask you, just finally, Andrew Wilkie, I mean, this is speculative, I know, but the leaking of this particular YouTube video with the former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd swearing as he was and banging the table and so forth, I mean, how do you feel about this? It's clearly been done by somebody either looking to spice up events, if you're thinking that it's come from the Rudd camp, although I find that spin from the Gillard supporters hard to take, or it has indeed come from a Gillard supporter, authorised or otherwise, just to be able to try to damage the former Prime Minister?
Who knows? I mean, whoever leaked it's one issue. I mean, what it says about Kevin's another thing. Look, he's a human being as flawed as the rest of us. So he swears, so what?
Yep, fair enough. All right, Andrew Wilkie, we appreciate you joining us on this particular episode of Australian Agenda. We appreciate your company.
My pleasure. Thank you.
When we come back from the break, we'll be joined by New South Wales Premier Barry O'Farrell. But to take you to the break, I wrote an article in The Australian yesterday talking about how the Prime Minister seems to be falling into the trap of George Costanza off Seinfeld, and everything that she seems to touch goes the wrong direction. And maybe she should do what he did in a particular episode of that series and start doing the opposite of every instinct he's ever had. Let's take a look.
Why did it all turn out like this for me? I had so much promise.
There will be no carbon tax.
I was personable. I was bright.
Of course, political people look at political circumstances.
Every decision I've ever made in my entire life has been wrong.
I never meant to mislead anybody during the last election campaign.
Every instinct I have in every aspect of life, be it something to wear, something to eat, it's often wrong.
I did not ask for a speech to be prepared.
But were you aware that one was being prepared?
Look, I've just given the best answer I can to your question.
My question was simply whether or not.
I heard your question and I've answered it.
If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
Yes. I will do the opposite.
You haven't answered the question.
Well, I've given you the answer I'm going to give you.
This is Mr. Costanza. He's one of the applicants.
Hire this man.